I didn't see myself as a marketer. I was a car guy, and I was just trying to sell cars. I was just trying to sell cars that were unique or better than something you get on a dealer lot for whatever reason. But it turns out the stories I was telling to try and make that connection was its own marketable thing.
Welcome back to the Art of Connecting podcast. This is your host, Hayden Fike here. We're actually live in person this time with the guests. I have Casey Tuggle here with me. Casey, last night he told me this, and I love this. Casey is the most well-connected man you've never heard of. That was his tagline, and I'm like, we're going to use that. So me and Casey met through Lee Gates, who was actually on the podcast. He was like episode number 3. And one day Lee called me and was like, there's these 2 guys that are doing this real estate thing. You might be interested in it. And we went and got dinner and ended up being business partners. So how are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm getting better. I'm not a morning person, so the caffeination is helping. I'll get gradually smarter as the podcast continues. So
Perfect.
We'll stick with this.
Yeah, just keep chugging that coffee there. Awesome. I wanted to get started. As I told you last night, this is not really scripted. And for the listeners, I'm going off the seat of my pants typically whenever I do these episodes. But if you want to just go ahead and start telling the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you love.
Yeah. So I thought about stealing chat rap from Cole, but I'm not going to. I was like, no, that was my first time. That's his phrase. But I am multi-generational Chattanoogan. And people are always like, oh, really? You don't have one of the last names I'd recognize. I'm like, no, somebody has to work in the kitchens of the really nice buildings. And that was my family. So yeah, we've been here a long time, and I'm a very much a Chattanoogan and Chattanooga evangelist, a localist. And so a lot of what I love doing is helping people connect to the region and find out why I love this as my home. And a lot of the people that move here intentionally are here for similar reasons. And so a lot of what I love doing has to do with Chattanooga and the area. And I've always entertained ideas of moving, but I haven't on purpose, and I stay for a reason. And I think that reason is part of what helps me connect with other people locally here.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what are some of I know you're involved in several organizations in town. What are some of those?
Yeah, I've been involved with government a fair amount since I was probably like 19, I think. I've been involved in government in some way. I worked with the Planning Commission in Cleveland, Bradley County back in the day on projects. And I was a campaign manager for people, which I was probably 20 when I was campaign manager for a guy who ran for city council, and he won. So then other people are like, oh, who's that kid you have?
Awesome.
That kind of helped. And I enjoyed being able to be helpful, make these connections, but not be the person who had the media scrutiny. And it's not like you get massive media scrutiny being a local official. But I still wanted it to be more about the work in the community and less about let's analyze your entire past and everything you've ever said. And that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So I started trying to help people get elected that I believed in. And then that transitioned to doing similar things in business. And most of what I do is marketing or tangentially related to marketing. And that's what I've made my career out of. I've done operations management too, but my real passion is for marketing. I enjoy that more than I do analyzing a P&L. So yeah, marketing is still always my go-to.
Awesome. And so your family going back, they were very much working class.
Yeah. My grandmother, she's deceased now, but she was a cook at the Reed House. And I'm talking like the 40s to 60s, like way back in the day. And a lot of my ancestors, if you go back and look at the old microfilm of the library of the Chattanooga Business Directory, a lot of my like great-grandfather and great-grandfather and all that, they worked as machinists or printers or just normal people, so we've been here forever, but we were the guys like resurfacing your engine block, making your food. We were starting insurance companies or, making soft drinks.
So what did childhood look like for you then?
Extremely poor. Yeah. My father was a house builder and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. We were homeschooled. There were 3 of us.
You were homeschooled?
Back then, it wasn't actually legal, which is interesting. So that creates, a lot of people don't realize that because homeschooling is very popular now. Back then, it was not legal to be homeschooled. And so it was an interesting kind of outsider perspective from an early age. But yeah, K through 12, didn't go to school until Lee. So that was an interesting awakening.
I don't know how I didn't know that because I was homeschooled too.
Oh, all right. I didn't know that either.
All except for 1st and 2nd grade.
See, you were legal.
I was legal, yeah. And my homeschooling probably looked a little different than most people's too.
Yeah.
So That's actually really interesting. Do you feel like homeschooling was an advantage or a disadvantage for you
I,
going into college?
yeah, I definitely think that the socialization aspect was challenging. I really wish I got to play team sports. Like all I really got to do was swim on the swim team. Macaulay allowed homeschooling students by the time I got to high school. So I got to swim at Macaulay, which is a private school here in Chattanooga. But I never really got to do team sports. Like I would have loved to play baseball, and I didn't really have that opportunity. So some of that like team socialization I definitely missed out on. It was not like I didn't have friends,
Hmm.
but most of my friends were the public school kids who lived in my neighborhood. So I think the socialization was a challenge. But the upside is I really got to learn what I wanted to learn. And I got to direct my own education a lot more, which sounds scary saying, well, a child can't make those decisions, but a child knows what they're interested in.
Yep.
And I had a lot more autonomy to pursue that than I did if I'd been in a structured system.
I spent more time watching personal finance videos and car reviews than I did doing school.
I wrote most of my papers about cars. So
Yeah.
word.
Yeah. And now it's served you very well
Mhm.
being in the industry you're
Yep.
in. So,
Automotive marketing, that's what I do.
and that's what's interesting to me is like, if you allow a young brain to pursue what they're interested in, it opens up. That's people like, how are you so wise? Like I'm using air quotes here because
Sure.
I'm in my own head. I'm not, trust me. But it's like, that's because I was able to research. I did a ton of research when I was like 14 years old. If I ever wanted to buy something, I would like spend hours
Oh, yeah.
on end because I had nothing better to do. What is the sound quality of this earbud versus this earbud? I'm comparing like $20 earbuds. I don't know. Just did stupid stuff
Hard
like
saying.
that. But
Back when Consumer Reports was an actual physical magazine, I was on what they called their Zillions team, the Z team. And at like 10 years old, I was doing product reviews for Consumer Reports. So,
really,
yeah, hard same. But I think what homeschooling teaches you is it teaches you to be self-starting because you have a tenuous relationship with your mom/teacher, and it's in your best interest to be motivated. And so I think that self-starting kind of mentality is what you get from homeschooling that is probably the most valuable thing.
Mm,
And then, of course, the ability to pursue your interests.
awesome. So sounds like to me homeschooling was helpful,
Mhm.
but also you didn't get the socialization that you may have hoped to have gotten. And knowing you now, you're not the most outgoing person. Like you're not necessarily going to intentionally go walk across the room to have a conversation with somebody.
Right.
But if I sit next to you on a bar stool, we're going to talk for 2 hours. So like, how did you develop the ability to create connections with people when you maybe didn't have as many of those growing up?
A lot of my stuff came from extracurriculars. So I was a big mock trial competitor, and we were on good teams. We went to state competitions and stuff. So a lot of what I learned was actually from academic teams, which is a bit different from what you would learn from baseball because I finally got to play intramural baseball in college. And so I've got a little bit of perspective. But I think what I learned from the academic teams is how to connect with people and how to determine what people need, what they're interested in doing. And I became very much a student of motivation. And so I was never somebody who just wanted a ton of casual connections,
Mm,
but I was very interested in finding out why people made the decisions they did, what motivates them, why do they get up in the morning, and what do they want to do as soon as they're free with unstructured time. And I think that ability allowed me later to understand. You referenced The Go-Giver. I've not read it, but I'm very familiar with the concept. And I wanted to try and help people achieve their goals. And it
mm,
wasn't for any of my own gain or purpose. I just thought, this is really interesting. The person wants something completely different than what I want. So how do they get there? And it wasn't a thing where I consciously was like, I'm going to help them. I just would always retain that because I was always interested in their motivation. And later would say, hey, I need a guy who does this. I'm like, hey, I know a guy who wants to do that. Let me see if I can get you two together. And so I started connecting lots of people. And eventually those people became more and more important. And we all got older and they started owning things. And then their employees I had conversations with. And as time goes along, I ended up knowing a lot of people. And I feel like understanding what was their drive. And motivated people have this shared innate drive that some reason they can't explain. There's always something that they feel inside them pushes them forward and motivates them. A lot of times they can't even say what it is. But if you start asking like, what is it you're really passionate about? Is that what you do here? Do you bring that into your work? And you can explore how people work through things. And so I started trying to connect people on what they're passionate about and not just what they say they do.
mm.
It's not always the same thing.
So when did you start this kind of interest and study into what people are passionate about and what motivates people?
Probably in college, I wanted to be a lawyer. And at the school that I went to, they didn't have pre-law per se. They had political science and English as a double major. And so that's what I did. And political science is a behavior and social science. And you spend a lot of your time looking at kind of sociology, the behavior of people in groups, but they also want to look at the individual, the voter, the politician, historically, how have all these things worked together. And so I started thinking in the beginning, what were people's political views and motivations and why did they believe that? Especially if they believe something polar opposite to me. Okay, that's interesting. What is it that gives you that perspective? And some people didn't have a good reason for it, but some people really had good reasoned thoughts and ideas. And so it began from their political motivation and then would become more about their life and how do you make these choices and where do you see this going? Are you getting what you think you want out of life? We're not here for all that long. Kind of that feeling of impermanence and people always working towards something they can't necessarily see or even formulate into a thought was really interesting to me.
That's very interesting. So it started in college with the interest of how, with politics really was where it started. And you had mentioned you're interested in politics, but you don't want the issues that come along with politics.
Right.
Was there a point where you were like, I want to go and make change and be in the limelight, or was it always that I want to stay in the background kind of thing?
So I went through Seth Godin, if you've ever heard of him. He's a famous marketing guy. He's the guy with the yellow glasses. So most people remembering the bald dude with glasses. I went through Seth Godin's Alt MBA, and in the process of that, one of the things you had to do was like to create a goal for yourself and something you're going to achieve. And these were really big, high-performing people, a lot of them from Fortune 500s, and they're all like, I want to go write this book and do these things. And a lot of them did. I'm still connected with people who've become really successful authors, and good for them. Mine was, I want to run for the city council in my little town of 22,000 people. So my goal was, I think, much more achievable. And then as I started looking at that, I realized, no, I don't want to, because those people are held to a different standard because the voters are always going to have their own perspective, and the voters are always going to challenge any decision, whether it's good for the city or not. So I became an appointed official and then became the chairman of 2 boards and realized, wait a minute, this is much better because the media doesn't really pay that much attention. They do attend the meetings, but to them, this is just procedural stuff. But this is really where people are able to make the connection with their government, get what they want, and you can keep the feeling of this area intact. And that a lot of that power is held through boards and appointed positions. It's much harder to try and appease and be a good politician and actually get stuff done. You spend a lot of time just trying to make sure everything is averaged. And I thought, man, that's not really what I want. I'd rather do stuff. So I was actually just randomly approached by a previous mayor, and he was like, hey, do you want to get on this board? I was like, yeah, I actually used to do almost the same thing in Bradley County a long time ago. I could do that. And then that became, hey, do you want to do this board? And do you want to be the chairman of this board, et cetera? So then I had like minor authority in this little city, but I achieved my goal of being able to help my town move forward. It's actually the town where you live, so you're familiar. And so I was able to help them in that transformation, but without ever having to go through the arduous process of getting elected.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So one of the mindset coaches that has helped me, we were in Costa Rica, and he asked, what is your goal? And he liked to pick on me a lot because I was the youngest person there. Not pick on me, but call on me and try and like pull things out of me. And I said that my goal was to be able to make a phone call, be anywhere in the world and solve any problem, which is super broad. And I was like, I don't know how you quantify that, and I don't even really know where I was going with that either. But I feel like, gosh, I don't know where I was going with that. I had this like super exciting thing that I was going to say with that, but man, that sucks.
You're getting old already.
I'm already getting old, and I just want to, I need to keep this in the episode so you guys know this is the real me.
It doesn't get any better. At 20 years, I promise it still sucks as much.
But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but I do know where I was going with that. I just, epiphany on me, if that's a word.
It is now.
Yeah. By you being that person, someone had a problem and you were that person that they called.
Yeah.
And I think it's just as powerful too, to be the person that people can call to solve problems. And then that is the relationship goes both ways. So if you have an issue, you can call that person and you're both able to figure out your own problems through each other.
Yeah. When I first saw Pulp Fiction in 2004 or something, and I saw Harvey Keitel's character, and I think he's Mr. Wolf, I think is his name, and he's the fixer, and he comes in when they accidentally kill the guy, and I thought, that's me. That's what I do. That's what I want to do. I want to be that guy, and I really enjoyed kind of being the fixer. And for a while, people would ask what I did. I worked for a guy who's a prominent businessman here. Like, so what do you do for him? And I said, like Harvey Keitel, I just go and fix things. And for a long time, really, that is what I did. My normal day wasn't planned. It was problem fix over and over. And then I learned that I enjoyed that, but the stress of it is a lot. So then I moved to, what is the thing I'm really passionate about? And I kind of repositioned marketing.
And let's talk about your marketing job. So you went to school for political science, English, got your MBA, correct? Is that?
No, I got an alt MBA, which means nothing. No, Seth Godin's alt MBA is a program that is like an intensive course for people who, they may already have their own MBA, but it's a really intensive, like, thought starting and goal setting and mindset course, and teaches you a lot about goal setting and achievement, and makes you confront really challenging questions that are maybe things they don't teach you in business school. It looks like I'll probably have to go get my MBA here in a couple of years, but I've managed to avoid it so far.
Why would you have to go and get your MBA?
So our company really likes people who are in the succession plan to have an MBA, and it was suggested that I may want to go do that at some point. But I've always believed in continuing education. I'm going to Duke's leadership, I don't know what you call it, session, I guess, this year. It's good to continue improving, but I've never gone after the MBA route. But the alt MBA taught me a lot of really valuable stuff, and they would make you write an article on why customers who choose to purchase from your competition are correct to do. Like, that's really challenging, because you always believe, and like, no, if people just knew, like, we really believe in what we're doing. We provide a great value, have best price, best service, best whatever. And then you have to think about, for people who don't value that, why are you not the right solution? So I got a lot of challenge out of that, and I really enjoyed it, but no formal MBA yet.
So you don't have technically a marketing degree.
Right.
How did you get your marketing job? In high level marketing job. This isn't just like you're clicking ads on Facebook.
Yeah. I'm a vice president of marketing for a pretty good sized regional company. And I own another marketing company that has 341 clients. As of yesterday, I happened to check. So I know today how many clients we have. That's how many we have. And through all that, it became a means to an end. I worked for a large insurance company, and I couldn't stand it. I liked certain things about that company, but I really couldn't stand the work. I was like, man, I have zero passion for the intangible product of insurance. I'm glad that Cole wakes up in the morning and does that. I don't. Right? So I wanted to do anything but that. So I quit. I cashed out my pension, and I started my own auto brokerage because I was passionate about cars. Step one is, wait a minute, people have to come buy these things.
Right.
How do I distinguish myself from the really large franchise dealerships? And so I started thinking a whole lot more about marketing at that point. And okay, well, what do I need to spend? What can I do organically? Do I need to write blogs, do, this, do that? And so I started thinking a lot about it. And apparently I made some correct choices accidentally. And I started asking questions. I was going to the chambers meetings they used to have over at the Business Development Center. And I would go ask CPAs questions about tax strategy and that kind of thing. But I would also ask marketing questions. And I joined, back then, social media was still pretty new. So there were a couple of social media groups in Chattanooga, the Social Media Alliance of Chattanooga, and another one whose name escapes me. And so I joined both of those, really started talking to professionals, and was like, okay, so I can advertise in social media, and that's a cheap way to find people. So I started trying to be on the forefront and find little ROI advertising methods that maybe the big companies hadn't adapted yet. I was like, all right, I'm going to do this thing. And then eventually other people are like, hey man, you've been successful. Can you do that for us? And eventually that became, can you come work here and do that? Or can you help my company do that? And it went from me trying to be able to pay my house note and survive to, oh, okay, so you want to have my staff do that, and I just watch this for you. Okay.
Wow.
So yeah, interesting kind of accidental progression.
Yeah. And I think it also just goes to prove that you don't need to have necessarily the degree or the pedigree. A lot of times it's just figuring stuff out on your own and then after you bang your head on a wall long enough, you get good at it. And then people start asking you and they see your success. So it sounds to me too like you saw a problem in your business and you're like, I don't have the capacity or ability to do this. I need to find a connection. You were like seeking out to connect to somebody to solve your problem. And how important were those meetings, like showing up in person and taking the effort to go and drive out there and ask people questions to your success?
Yeah, I think it was super important to go in person because you have to gauge people's body language. I think so much of our communication is nonverbal. Like right now, I'm using my hand to express a point that people can't hear, but it is part of communication, and that's innate. And although I do love a good telephone call or a Zoom meeting for their efficiency, it doesn't quite capture the same thing. And I wanted to go to the meeting, listen to other people's questions, because that was important. They may think of a question where I hadn't even thought of that as a problem yet. So I wanted to hear what other people were saying. I wanted to meet other people with similar struggles. And I wanted to be able to ask somebody in a realistic way and see does he roll his eyes like I'm asking a super junior question, or does he cock his head like, I don't know, I've never thought about that. Like, how insightful is my question? So I really wanted to be able to find out, am I even going the right direction here? And then some of the people I met in those groups ended up joining a B&I group and doing some of these other things. And so I wanted to shape my own connections and be able to make these things because I had a little auto brokerage. I wasn't sitting on a lot full of 100 cars. I was finding a car for people and selling it. Right? So it was a much different, it was a much more personal transaction. I had something I was trying to do that people don't do in this area. And I think that connection of being able to go face to face, ask questions, get them answered right then, but also be able to read their body language and understand, am I asking a realistic question or am I just really dumber than everyone else, was important for knowing how to approach it. So
that's awesome. And so what happened with that auto brokerage? Did you end up selling it, dissolving it? What happened with it?
I was one of several hundred customers at the auto auction, as you would expect, dealer-only auto auction. And I was standing in the lane one day, just waiting to buy a car. Nothing exciting. I think it was like a 10-year-old Accord. Somebody needed one for their kid. Okay. So I'm standing there, and this guy walks up, a British fellow, stands next to me, and he's asking, am I Casey? And I'm not going to try and imitate his accent because I'm horrible at it. He's from East London, so he has a very distinctive accent. But he said, hey, I've seen your website. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm like trying to figure out how he even knows who I am, much less know my website, et cetera. He said, I really like what you're doing. And like you're tying in social media with the cars. I think that's really interesting. I said, okay. He said, I'm Tony. I'm one of the owners here. Oh, okay. And he said, would you mind coming and consulting with us? Because we'd really like to change our website and the way we connect with our dealers. I said, sure. Because consulting to me sounds like money. So yeah, we can do that. And then it turned into, actually, I think that's something we really want to invest in. Would you like to work here? And so I kept my auto brokerage going for a while as a side project, but the work with the auction became pretty extensive. I ended up being the general manager of that.
Oh, wow.
We sold the company and I was the general manager under the new company as well. So then I got to work for a guy who had over 1,000 employees and was 240 days a year in the air, like super overly connected guy all over the country every day. And I would travel with him some and meet a lot of other people. And ultimately, I didn't really see eye to eye with him. So I left and went to work for another related business group. But during that time of being discovered as a little one-man band, just trying to make my way in the world, and somebody noticed and said, hey, can you come do that here? And that was huge. That was a big change. And through working at the auction, my boss had a whole lot of real estate interests. And he taught me a lot of the rules of thumb for this is what a house of this size will rent for. This is how much it costs to paint it white. This is how much it costs to paint it tan. If you do stack stone and hardy board, it'll give you this kind of return. So I started learning about rental properties from him and then getting into other property avenues and really enjoyed real estate and really liked the problem solving that can come with real estate and allowed me to meet a lot more people like you, for example, and Lee Gates. So a lot of really interesting people who had a lot of love for their community, especially, and wanted to see distressed properties get remade and reborn into something new and exciting, and new families move in, people who really wanted to make their communities better. A lot of that was still involved in real estate. And I thought, man, there's a lot of marketing in real estate. I can do this.
Yeah.
So I think my perspective is not, I'm a real estate investor. My perspective is I do marketing. And one of the ways I do it is in real estate.
And so we'll plow into real estate. I wanted to ask a question because this was interesting to think about how you were over operating by yourself, trying basically start up, just trying to pay your house payment. And someone really liked what you did. Before that happened, how often did you think about quitting and leaving and going doing something else?
Probably not every day, but I would say every other day. There are moments, and that's the problem about being a one-man band. There is no scale. The scale is you and your time. And there were days when it would be impossibly late, and I've met customers and I've driven across town to go look at some rare car and give them an appraisal, and they're never realistic. And then I would have to stay and try and wash a car because somebody was going to see it the next day. And this whole time I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. I'm doing 14 hours a day. Tomorrow, somebody's going to miss a meeting and not show up. And so I'm going to be sitting here staring at the wall, trying to figure all this out. And the lack of scalability was really getting me down. And I thought, this is not what I thought it would be. Like, I should stop. And I thought, maybe if I could just get it big enough, maybe I could sell this to someone, right? I've gone through all the licensing. I've got a professional license. Maybe this is worth something. But it was really disheartening. And I didn't realize that what I thought was just a simple way of making connections where I could cheaply find customers was a new way of making connections that the regular business world hadn't really adopted. And I didn't realize that had any value. But I applied. I was trying to do Facebook ads. And we're talking 2010. I was trying to do Facebook ads for cars, which wasn't a thing back then. So I applied with Facebook to get into Facebook ad developers license. And it was that number, that old application I did that we actually eventually used for now the company I said has 341 clients. We applied to their accelerator in 2016 with my old developer certificate and got accepted, and we're in Facebook's accelerator.
Wow.
And carried on. So the things you don't realize are providing you value sometimes are really the meaning and the purpose. But I think what made it different is that's what I became passionate about. I really enjoyed writing about these cars and making videos about these cars and doing these things and telling people this is why this one's good. There's a lot of Accords. This one's good because it's been one family since it was new. And this is, this is a great car, blah, blah, blah. I've been all through it. And I enjoyed telling that story. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. No, maybe it is the marketing. Maybe this is just motivations. It's just motivations that people haven't met yet. What are they? I know what they should connect with. Who's going to connect with it? And then trying to tell that story.
Have you ever heard of Hoovie's Garage?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think he has a little bit of a similar story to yours. And you look at him now and he's building his new barn mansion, huge garage, has an airport hangar.
Lambos everywhere. Yep.
But his start, I watched his first ever video, the Mercedes S-Class that he bought. And but before the videos, he would write for Doug DeMuro's blog, I think, or something like that. He was a copywriter while he was flipping hamburgers at the restaurant his dad owned. And that was what led him to realize, hey, I'm passionate about cars. Maybe let me make videos. And then this first videos, they were awful. I watched them because they were so bad. It was funny to watch. And I think he's deleted them. So I tried to go back and watch them, but they're really I watched his first ever video. For some reason, YouTube thought that I would like that content and been a subscriber ever since. And I love his videos. But anyways, I don't know where I was going on that tangent, but I feel like that was similar to you where you started with one thing and then you're like, oh wait, I actually enjoy this thing and I hate the thing that I thought I would like.
Yeah, because actually selling the cars sounded great because I can talk to people about cars. This is awesome. I can share a love for cars. I quickly realized most people didn't love cars, needed transportation.
Yeah.
Okay, this is horrible. But wait a minute, I like telling these stories. And that became the key to success and the key to transitioning from I have a job, I can keep my house, to, oh, I have a career and this is the thing people call me about. And this is what I travel and speak about. And so I do speak about automotive marketing. And I think that was the big change is, oh, wait a minute, you want me to come to your conference and speak? That's okay. That's strange. What do you want me to talk about? The things that you do. Okay. Interesting. You don't look at it abstractly when you're doing the work.
Right. Isn't that a crazy moment when you first get asked? I got asked to speak for a networking event thing. And I'm like, what do you want? The same thing. You want me to speak? Are you sure? I don't know what I'm doing.
Me, right? For sure. I'm just trying to make it work.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the key is that scrappiness that comes with trying to make it happen is part of what gives you the ability to look for unconventional solutions. And that becomes appealing to other people. And that a lot of my connections came from when people would say, oh no, I know a guy who knows about that. And then
you would actually call them and say, because I know a lot, I'm guilty of this too. People will be like, oh, I have this guy that, just the other day, I was on the phone with a connect call inside of the mastermind I'm in. And I was like, yeah, I work in a food tour business and do tours. And he was like, oh, I know a guy that owns a food tour business in Toronto. Let me connect you to him. And I haven't pursued that as hard as I should because that's super cool. Who else owns a food tour business? So I need to, after this, go back and call that guy. But
This is your reminder.
yeah, for real. But it's like a lot of times, especially people who aren't as conscious about how important those connections can be and how pivotal like any phone call that you make can be.
Right.
You get that introduction, you're like, oh, I'm busy, I'm working on this, I'll get to it later. And then you never do. And then 2 years later, you're like, I still have this problem. And then you're like digging through, trying to find it. And you call that person and they're like, oh yeah, this is the answer. And it's like,
No, you could have saved so much time.
yeah,
And I think helping people not have to relearn mistakes you've made is super important and key. And I think it's important even to people sometimes that I compete with. It's not hard. There's plenty of business out there. But there are people who say, hey, I really want to get into real estate investing. I'm trying to do this. I probably get asked that. No exaggeration. I probably get asked 2 or 3 times a week of, hey, I'm trying to do this. What do you think? And fortunately, most of the times they're things I've already tried and failed. And I'm like, here's how you could change and make that successful. Because there's plenty of business out there. And I think even helping people who are ostensibly your competitors be able to avoid mistakes and pitfalls just helps everybody. There's a rising tide aspect. But with networking, it has become, eventually I became the guy. People would say, hey, my friend Casey knows these things. Or I would get random, really disconnected questions where I couldn't see the connection, but they could. Like I'm in a jewelry store not too long ago, and it's a custom jewelry store. Yeah, our Facebook account's been shut down, and their email got hacked and blah, blah. So I can restore that for you. So I got that restored, and they're like, hey, we're really struggling with our marketing. Do you want to take it over? And I was like, absolutely not. Because I have learned limits, right? So I value my time differently now. But I said, let me introduce you to a couple of people who can do that. And so they're the people that are like where I was and have already solved a lot of the problems that are hard, but they're still hungry for the business. I'm like, hey, here's 2 guys. Go work it out with them. They can handle it and they'll do you a good job.
And the cool part about being in your position and what I'm continually finding is you can still you can become a referral partner. Like being a referral partner to me is like one of the coolest things in the world because all I do is send a text message. And if a deal goes through that I am working on, I'll make $10,000 to $20,000 off of one text message.
Right.
I'm like, he's going to make 60 grand, but I don't care because I made 10 grand and I'm doing literally what I do all day long anyways, is sending text messages.
Sure. And I never begrudge people who are making connections to make good money.
Yeah.
I've always said there've been plenty of times when I was in operations and our top salespeople were making more than me. I don't care. I wouldn't be making what I'm making if I were for my top salespeople. So let them make the money. We wrote the pay plan. I know what it says.
And they work 90 hours a week to make that money.
And I don't. Let's be real.
Yeah.
So I think it's absolutely important. The internet has made everything much different and easier to connect on the global aspect. And I think that change has made personal connection actually more important. And there is no reason why you can't be the connector because all the information is available, but now we don't know how to sort it or what to do with it. And AI can only go so far. AI can give you a synopsis, but it can't say, your friend John is really into that. And he's actually open to work right now.
Right.
And that's something you can only do interpersonally. And I think actually the further we get out into living hybrid digital lives, the more genuine connection is important to help people get what they really want and not just how they're presenting it.
I think it's going to become increasingly more important to be able to be an expert in the ungoogleable things.
Yes.
We talk about that in our mastermind all the time. Like the mastermind I'm in, it's a collection of 80 entrepreneurs, business owners, real estate people. Like we're all over the map on what we do. And if I post a question, no matter what it is relating to business, entrepreneurship, real estate, there's someone in there that can answer my question that has done what I want to do.
Sure.
Those are the ungoogleable things. Like, sure, you can Google it, but you're going to get 20 articles one's going to say one thing and one's going to say the other. And then you're going to be like, what do I do? You're going to be like a lost puppy dog. And you're going to end up just sitting down because you don't have the answer you're looking for.
Yeah.
If you can be an expert in the ungoogleable, you will be unstoppable. Because like you said, AI can't tell whether someone's slightly pissed off by their tone of voice. Maybe in 30 years it can, but it can't right now. And those little notes, picking up on those types of things can help you uncover problems and help you solve problems, which solve problems leads to profit.
Yeah. And I think that basic humanity, there's a commonality. Everybody's just trying to do something, make a contribution, and go home. A lot of them go back to their families, watch Netflix, travel, whatever. Most of us do pretty similar stuff. And the more you travel the world and you go to China and you're like, man, everything's so different. And then you see people going to work and going home and trying to eat and trying to grab a quick bite. Oh, wait a minute. No, this is pretty much the same everywhere, right? And so trying to help people and connect with basic humanity and say, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? How can we move that forward? And I think that's important. And it is being ungoogleable as a person is also important for me. I Google myself frequently, but it's not to make sure I'm ranking well. It's to do the opposite. I don't want a lot of the stuff I'm working on to be really evident. My company that has all these clients, I'm a white labeler. No end client knows the name of my company because we do technology. We are not your client manager, your relationship manager. We provide a service to the agency who services you. So I don't want my name in the papers. When I speak, I don't give the name of my company. I'm very careful. Like even when I do thought leadership things, I'm using air quotes because I hate that term. But when I'm doing these things on LinkedIn, I'm not identifying my company. I'm just talking about the concepts in abstract. I started looking at some of the most successful people I know. And if you look at their LinkedIn pages, it says something like problem solver.
Yeah.
What in the world does that even mean? But I know that guy. I know he's got a Learjet, but he just it's just a bad picture from the 90s and it says problem solver. Oh. So I think those people are ones who really valued the personal connection. And I'm not devaluing online connection because I used to be a really big LinkedIn person and I made a lot of valuable connections that way. But my most valuable connections were actually in person. And they were from not other people who I knew I need to go connect with that person because it was people I met casually and said, oh, wait a minute. I think I can help you with that. I know so. And it was the offhand the comments, the trying to solve problems together that always produced the most profit and the most value. And I don't know. I've given up on social media.
People know when you're legit.
Yeah.
It honestly makes you a little bit more exclusive when you're the person that they call it. Who is this guy? And then I know a guy like that, like my friend Sam. I need to have him on here. Sam's podcast, it'll be crazy, but
his is actually good.
Oh yeah, it would be. No, this is great too. I mean, like his podcast would be really cool too, though, because it's like he is such a master of just operating in the background, just like you. Like he has a tap on to 50 family offices in New York, billions of dollars that he could just make a phone call. If there's a good deal, it'll get funded. And he drives a beat up 2005 Acura MDX. Like he looks like anybody else, but you start talking to him and you're like, holy crap, this guy, just like when I talk to you, is I feel like if I ever had some obscure random question that I just didn't know who else to ask, I would call you.
I get that a lot. My wife always laughs about it because I got a call, the most random question I've ever been asked. Somebody calls me and goes, hey man, quick question. Okay. He said, how much is a marriage license in Georgia? First of all, I don't live in Georgia. Somehow I actually did know the answer to this, but I just get to ask the most random things. But yeah, I definitely don't want the attention. I think when I first met you, I was driving my 87 Toyota pickup, which I don't wash and has a belt squeak, which I know about, but it's fine. And I let it squeak. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to project success. There are a couple of really famous names who have really good coaching courses about selling and about word tracks that I respect what they've done. However, I didn't want to be that guy. I wanted to deliver value and not a sale. And I think delivering value requires humility and not a projection of success. Projecting a sale is a different energy than projecting value.
I was reading Proverbs this morning, and this verse really stood out to me. It's funny that we're talking about this. It's Proverbs 13:7. One person pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth.
There you go.
I read that this morning, and I was like, okay. Because it's so true. Like, you see it all the time where, like, some of the most wealthy guys that I know are just the most, like, cheap. Like, there's one person that comes to my mind, and, like, he has a huge mansion now, but like I went to his old house right before he got his mansion. And I'm like, this is just a normal house. Like it looks like every other house on the block. He's like in the bathroom, like renovating it, just like my dad would. And like he upgraded because his partner wanted to upgrade. But it was really interesting because when you know behind the curtains and see like how that works, there has to be something to that. And it's interesting that you take the same approach, and it's something that I strive for. The only fancy thing that I like is my watches. It's like my one.
I have to show you. I'm also a watch person, but today I'm wearing a watch I got last night as a Christmas present. This is a Casio F91W.
I figured that was from 1990.
I know, because it's one of the great original durable digital watches. And yes, I do have nice watches. Today I am wearing this watch, which is a Casio. And I love it. I think it's awesome.
I wear my Fossils all the time.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
blue one I see all the time. Yeah.
I can just beat it on the counter and I don't care.
Yeah.
And if I beat this on the counter, I'd probably cry a little bit.
Sure. And I've got nice watches. I've got Swiss watches. There are times for that, right? But I don't wear those every day. And I drive my old pickup. And it's not necessarily that I'm trying to project something that I'm not. I think that is still who I am, right? Success has found me, but I wasn't necessarily, it didn't find me in the way I thought I was going to find it. It found me accidentally doing the thing I was passionate about and I cared about. And I think it was a long time before I realized, no, hold on, I can make my passion deliver value without monetizing my hobbies and making myself miserable. And so finding that balance, I think, was really important. But I wanted to dress it down because I wasn't looking for the notoriety. I didn't want to seem unapproachable. I didn't want to seem like I was putting on airs. I still eat at Waffle House 2 or 3 times a week for lunch. I'm such a regular that in my specific Waffle House, they don't take my order. I walk in, they go, "Hey, babe." I sit down, they hand me food. Like, this is my goal in life, right?
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's important for me. I didn't ever want to be the country club person. I didn't want to have a membership. I didn't want to go make connections that way. I wanted to make genuine connections with, "Oh, you have a problem? Cool. Well, what have you thought about? Well, let's talk about that. Here's my guy," or "I've looked at this," or "You can do this program," or "I think there's a new way you can do it," and trying to help bring success through efficiency. I think I made a lot of my early success through technical prowess. I was the most techie guy. I was the youngest guy. So by default, they're like, "Oh, he must know something. He's young." But there's a shift. I had to shift from being an analyst to being an adopter. And I wanted to help people find efficiencies that would make better outcomes. And usually that means sales, but also free time with their families, the ability to watch a show, to work out, whatever. And helping people find efficiencies. One of the easiest ways is in marketing, because it's something people don't generally understand or spend as much time thinking about as they probably should. Because you think, okay, marketing should be 2 or 3% of my budget, or whatever the rules of thumb you learned at some point. What you don't realize is, wait a minute, marketing well executed can 2x my business this year. So it only costs 2%, but look at what it can do for my top line. And so I wanted to try and help people find efficiencies and lean on new tech and be able to use emerging technology that's easy to integrate and say, do this thing, don't do what everybody else is doing, do this, and then watch it grow. And when their business takes off, I'm like, cool, high five, well done. I wasn't.
You listened to me. Good job.
Yeah, exactly. I told you I wasn't an idiot.
Yeah.
They'll put that in my tombstone.
That's awesome. We come up on our time. It's crazy. We've been recording for 47 minutes now, which is wild to me. Having a conversation so easy.
It is.
But I wanted to ask, final question here. I like to ask this to all my guests. Maybe what's a connection or a group of people that came into your life that you connected to that ended up leading to a success or a shift and a change in your life?
I think it was really important that day that I got spotted as a random guy in the auction. I think not only did that tell me maybe I'm on the right path, but not the path I thought I was on. I didn't see myself as a marketer. I was a car guy, and I was just trying to sell cars. I was just trying to sell cars that were unique or better than something you get on a dealer lot for whatever reason. But it turns out the stories I was telling to try and make that connection was its own marketable thing. And I think the discovery with Tony, and Tony turned out to be super connected. I didn't know that. Here's a little guy who's running an auction, and it's a dealer auction. They've got a few hundred customers. Whoop-de-doo. It's a big parking lot, but at the end of the day, it's 55 acres of parking lot. There's nothing that special. But it turns out Tony was a retired president of a division of Tyco. He had merged international auction companies. He was a regular writer for one of the large industry magazines. And Tony just happened to see a different approach and a new approach and was like, hey, come work with me here. I didn't know any of that. I didn't even know who he was. The owners weren't part of the auctioneer staff I normally engaged with. And then meeting them and learning real estate and being able to make all these connections, like it was amazing. That connection really propelled my life forward in the way that made me happy and also made me successful at the same time. But it wasn't the path I was thinking I was on.
And you were open to changing it too, which I
Yeah.
feel like is half the battle. Because if you've been doing the same thing for 3 years, it's not really working, but you've done it for 3 years. So
Right.
you're like, I don't want to change now.
Yeah.
Being open to that connection and that change.
Yeah. My success metric was I have not lost my house and I can still pay all of my insurance. So this is great. I can eat. And then it changed to, oh, wait a minute. Now I can invest and I can employ leverage and I can help people solve problems. And now I can buy that house that is an annoyance for you and fix it.
Oh, we didn't get into real estate.
One day.
But the good news is almost all of my podcasts that I do involve real estate because I'm in that world and that's who I usually connect to. So I honestly love the direction we went with this. And because if you want to listen and hear about real estate, you can go listen to half the podcast. But man, this has been an awesome episode. I know I've gotten a lot out of it and I know the listeners will as well. Now you fly under the radar. If someone has a question or is intrigued by what you say or wants to learn more, is there a way that they can reach out to you? Do they have to go and skip Tracy online and knock on your door? What does that look like?
So there's only 5 people named Casey Tuggle in the U.S. We all know each other, but I always race to be the fastest one on any new platform. So CaseyTuggle.com redirects to my LinkedIn.
Okay.
And CaseyTuggle@gmail.com is also mine because I beat out the insurance agent in Pensacola who also has that name. I won. I have CaseyTuggle@gmail.com.
All right, perfect. So if you feel like Casey can answer your random question, send him an email about how much a marriage license costs in Georgia. So thank you so much for coming on today. This has been such a fun episode. And maybe we'll do a part 2 and we can talk about more because I feel like there's a lot that we can extract out of this. So
Like real estate.
yeah, that's right. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Got value out of this? Please leave a 5-star review. That's how other people find the podcast. And the fastest way for a podcast to grow is for you to share it with someone else if you liked what you heard. If you aren't yet, go ahead and follow us on Instagram at the Art of Connecting or Art of Connecting Pod. And you can find us on Facebook at Art of Connecting Podcast. And if you're in the Chattanooga area or the Southeast region, I have started Southeast Best Real Estate Meetup. And if you go and find us on Facebook at that, Southeast Best Real Estate Meetup, you'll find out the details on the meetup. We have 193 RSVPs so far for this month.
And I'm going. I don't know if RSVP, but I'll be there.
We have 194 RSVPs as of this moment. It's going to be an amazing event if you want to check that out. So we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.